Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to this glorious edition of the Bucknuts Morning 5. I am Dave Biddle, still basking in the glow of Ohio State's 42-35 win over Alabama last night in the Sugar Bowl / playoff semifinal. The day is January 2nd, 2015, and again, what a beautiful day it was for Ohio State yesterday. Getting the SEC monkey off their back, the first win in a bowl game over an SEC team. They were 0-10 previous to that. Of course, Ohio State won the Sugar Bowl 4 years ago, and that was wiped off the books because of the quote-unquote scandal, one of the weaker scandals you will ever see in your life, but it was wiped from the books. But what a great win for Ohio State, and that's an understatement. Nobody outside of Ohio State fans really gave them a chance in this game. Alabama was a 9-point favorite, and reading some of the predictions before the game was really amusing. You had a lot of people predicting things like 49-14 Alabama, and Ohio State came out from the get-go and showed that they were an excellent team. Now, the problem was Ohio State was shooting themselves in the foot throughout almost the entire first half. Twice they had first and goal and had to settle for field goals, including once where they had first and goal at the 1. They were in the shotgun. Cardale fumbled the snap, and he was tackled for an 8-yard loss. They had to settle for a field goal. It was reminiscent of the Michigan game in 1996. And Ohio State also had 2 turnovers in the first half. And you're thinking you're not going to be able to beat a team like Alabama, leaving that many points on the board and just gift-wrapping them points by turning the ball over. Yet here was Ohio State only down 21-20 at halftime. And I'm thinking at halftime, man, they're only down by 1 point. Get the ball to start the second half. If they can score, maybe they can get something going. Well, they scored, and man, did they get something going. Deep ball to Devin Smith for the touchdown. Steve Miller pick 6. All of a sudden, Ohio State is up 34-21. They went on a 28-0 run against the Crimson Tide. Absolutely amazing. And one thing I talked about last night in my What We Learned column that I think is really cool is Urban Meyer. He's really started this whole SEC dominance over the Big Ten, as we all know, because if you're listening to this show, you're a Buckeye fan, you probably hated Urban Meyer at one point. A 41-14 victory over Ohio State in 2006 in the national championship game. That was the first of 7 straight national championships for the SEC, including one the following year when Ohio State lost to LSU here in New Orleans, 38-24. So Urban Meyer was responsible for starting that whole mess. Well, guess what? He was also responsible for ending it last night. Now, the SEC is not going anywhere. I'm not saying the SEC is never going to be back, but the idea that a Big Ten team couldn't compete with a big boy like Alabama, the bully from the SEC, no one could compete with them. And this idea that the SEC West was this vaunted conference this year. I mean, look at how they performed in bowl games. Ohio State beat Wisconsin 59-0, and Wisconsin beat Auburn. Both Mississippi schools are ranked number 1 at different times this year. They both got waxed in their bowl game. Now Ohio State beating Alabama. So I just feel so good for Urban Meyer. And all of the talk that Nick Saban scared Urban Meyer away and made Urban Meyer fake chest pains and fake like he was having a heart attack. Alabama fans really believe that. Well, so much for all that. Urban Meyer showed he's not afraid of anything, and it was really cool. A lot of boxes were checked off for the Buckeyes. And now they're going to be in the national championship game. Several more thoughts here. Ezekiel Elliott, of course, MVP of the Sugar Bowl, now has 1,632 rushing yards on the year, 6.9 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns. Here's the most interesting thing. He is now 4th all-time in Ohio State as far as single-season rushing yards. And the guys that are ahead of him, you know their names. Eddie George is number 1 with 1,927 yards in his Heisman season of 1995. Keith Byers had 1,764 yards in 1984. And Archie Griffin had 1,695 yards in his first Heisman season of 1974. Ezekiel Elliott actually passed Beanie Wells last night. Beanie Wells had 1,609 yards in 2007, which now puts him in 5th place. So it looks like Ezekiel's definitely going to pass Archie for 3rd place, and might get ahead of Keith Byers. He needs about 130 yards to get ahead of Keith Byers, 132 yards exactly to tie Keith Byers, 133 yards to surpass Keith Byers for the second most rushing yards in Ohio State history for a single season. So Ezekiel Elliott is a flat-out stud. We're talking about a guy that's going to be a future NFL star, in my opinion. Not just a guy that's going to play in the NFL. I mean, he's got the total package. So Ezekiel Elliott was fantastic. The offensive line was fantastic. Keep in mind this, Bucknutters. Alabama entered play ranked number 1 in the country in rushing defense, averaging only 88 yards allowed on the ground. Ohio State had that by the end of the first quarter, and it was just amazing what Ohio State was able to do against this Alabama defense. We thought Ohio State would be able to move the ball, but again, Alabama only allowing 88 yards per game on the ground. Ohio State finished this game with 281 yards on the ground, and that includes sacks, or it would have been well over 300 yards, because really Cardale Jones did a pretty good job running the ball, but his rushing stats don't look good. 17 carries for 43 yards, because, he was sacked several times, and that factored into his rushing yards. But the bottom line is Ohio State's rushing attack was fantastic, and you got to really tip your cap to them. The wide receivers were also great. These guys were making plays. Obviously, Mike Thomas's touchdown at the end of the first half from Evan Spencer to make it a one-point game was huge. I have no idea how Mike Thomas got a foot in, but he did. Devin Smith, of course, had a couple of long passes, which he always does. Devin Smith averaging 43.5 yards a catch. That's what he does. Had a long touchdown, had another long touchdown that should have set up a touchdown, but didn't. Jalen Marshall made several tough catches. He really helped them come back there late in the first half, making a really good catch over the middle. He finished with 5 catches for 55 yards. Again, Mike Thomas continues to impress me, and it was more than just that one great catch that he had. Mike Thomas had some other really good catches. Evan Spencer played a good game, not just the touchdown pass that he threw, but certainly one of the biggest plays of the game was when Evan Spencer went up and caught that onside kick. Great game from the wide receivers. Defensively, I thought Darren Lee was the best player on the field, but for either team defensively. This guy looks like he is shot out of a cannon every time he is out there. It reminds me a lot of Antoine Winfield. Buckeye fans that remember the Antoine Winfield era will know what I'm talking about. If you're watching a game on TV during the Antoine Winfield era, and an Ohio State player came in from nowhere and just shot in and made a tackle, it was like kind of like a blur, and you're like, who was that? Well, your next thought was like, oh, it had to be Antoine Winfield. Then he would stand up, you'd see the number 11, like, yep, it was Winfield. Same deal with Darren Lee. Sometimes he'll fly in, you won't even know what number it is. Like, who was that? Well, it's probably going to be Darren Lee, and that's the type of game he plays. Now, Winfield was a corner, Lee's an outside linebacker, but I'm saying it reminds me so much. I mean, Lee just flies in there. He plays with such good angles. He's so fast. He's tough. He has good instincts, and it just reminds me a lot of, if you're watching a game on TV. I was watching this one in person, but I'm sure you noticed Darren Lee just flying at it out of nowhere, just taking people out, and the kid is a stud. Furthermore, on defense, Ohio State did a great job of containing Amari Cooper. We knew they wouldn't shut down Cooper, but, if you could hold him under 150 yards, maybe that would be good. Well, he didn't even get half of 150 yards. 9 catches, 71 yards, only 7.9 yards per catch. I did have 2 touchdowns. So, again, you're not going to shut down the best receiver in the country. But they contained him, and that's what they needed to do. Duran Grant, the rest of the DBs did a great job. Von Bell had the huge pick. So, great job by Ohio State of containing Amari Cooper. And again, Ohio State won the battle in the trenches. Offensive line, we talked about them earlier. The defensive line, I don't think Ohio State's defensive line played great, don't get me wrong. But I thought Ohio State won the battle in the trenches, and I don't think that's up for debate. The officiating. I'm glad Ohio State won this game. I'm just glad Ohio State won this game, period. But I'm glad they won this game so this doesn't sound like sour grapes when I'm talking about the officiating. The officiating wasn't terrible, but it was terrible in certain spots. There was an obvious pass interference call that should have been called on Alabama in the fourth quarter that wasn't on a deep ball to Devin Smith. I have no idea what the official was looking at. He's right on the play. I mean, the guy had 2 hands on Devin Smith, and it was textbook pass interference. For some reason, it wasn't called. And then later in the fourth quarter, Cam Johnston, it was absolutely roughing the punter. I have no idea how that was called, running into the punter. Urban Meyer about lost his mind. He totally lost his headset. He threw it, and I don't blame him. It was hard for me to, keep my cool in the press box watching that. I have no idea how that was not roughing the kicker. Cam Johnston could have had his legs broken on that play. So, whatever. Thankfully, the Buckeyes were able to withstand those bad calls and still win this game, but the officiating did leave a lot to be desired late. Overall, I don't think they were terrible, but they had some really questionable calls. There was also, right before an Alabama touchdown late, Alabama's last touchdown of the game, Von Bell was trying to call timeout, and so was Luke Fickell, and somehow the officials didn't see him. Luke Fickell's running on the field. Von Bell, I'm watching him call timeout. It looked like an official's looking right at him. They didn't see it. Hey, that stuff happens, but I thought the officials could have been a little better. So next up, the national championship game. 13-1 Ohio State against 13-1 Oregon. And by the way, this is only the second time Ohio State's ever won 13 games in a season, with the other, of course, being the 14-0 national championship season of 2002. The early line is already out. The Ducks are a 7-point favorite over the Bucks. I love Ohio State's chances in this game. I think they're going to be able to move the ball against Oregon's defense. And Ohio State seems to figure out a way to stop these gimmicky offenses. We'll see. I just think that they're going to come up with a good game plan. Of course, Oregon's the favorite, and well, they should be. But I love Ohio State's chances. And hey, they're playing with house money. They're playing with house money when coming to the semifinals. I mean, this has just been a magical season. Down to your third-string quarterback, no one gave him a chance. Enjoy it, Bucknutters. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, but it's just been a fun ride. The 59-0 win over Wisconsin, the most complete game that I've ever witnessed as from an Ohio State perspective, as far as when you consider the strength of opponent. Ohio State was an underdog in that game, and they went 59-0. And you back that up by beating Alabama in the Sugar Bowl in SEC country. And kudos to Buckeye fans. It might have been split. I think there's a little bit more Buckeye fans than Tide fans, but bottom line is, can you imagine this game being played in Indianapolis, there being equal amount of Bama fans? No. But this game was played in SEC territory, and Ohio State, they didn't take over the town, but they came damn close. So kudos to Buckeye Nation, as always. Kudos to all my listeners out there. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. I have no doubt that you will have a great day, because like me, you're probably still basking in the glow of that glorious victory last night. Thanks again, listeners. Take it away, best damn band in the land.